Welcome to Saturday's Warrior, the channel where we talk all things BYU, Big 12, and realignment. And today we are doing our preview of the BYU Kansas State matchup this weekend. And joining us, we have our fellow College Huddle members from the podcast and YouTube channel of Cocaine Willie, Bob Trollsby, and Chef. Guys, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Yep, let's go.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining me. We have already done a live version on your channel talking about the BYU perspective, filling in to the K-State fans. And so I'll obviously put all of your links and everything in the comments below, but tell everybody where they can go find you, where they can go watch that video and check out your other content.
Yeah, so we are at Cocaine Willie on YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, all the things, you name it, we've got it. We just don't have a Facebook page because nobody over the age or under the age of 40 uses Facebook anymore. So yeah, find us at Cocaine Willie. I'm at Bob Trollsby, Chef's at Chef Andre Napier. And then our third co-host, who is not here tonight, he's currently in Canada, is at Matt Marchesini.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Seriously, do go check them out. It's a great show. They do great stuff and it's a lot of fun and they know their ball. And so I'm really excited to have them on the show tonight for that reason. So we can learn a little bit about our foe this weekend in our latest installment of Know the Foe, as we get to look at Kansas State and how that they are going to lose to BYU this weekend. Just kidding. So first of all, I do need to put a warning out there for anyone who's worried about the Cocaine Willie podcast. There will be no usage of drugs on this episode, and everything will be BYU approved. So no worries there. We'll be very clean and family friendly in that regard. So anyway. So, guys, K-State, obviously BYU, Kansas State. The last time we played was in the Cotton Bowl, which maybe Kansas State has forgotten about. It looks like maybe not. BYU certainly hasn't forgotten about. We're still living off of that. So it was a highlight for us. But talk to us a little bit about your guys' fandom and experience with K-State, and really how you guys came together to make this podcast about Kansas State, not drugs.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'll say my fan experience started my fan experience probably started in like 98, and it's really never, really decreased since then. It's kind of been on an upward trajectory, even in my older age now. I can't get enough of the Cats. I'm addicted. And so when you're addicted like that and you're a middle 30-something-year-old, you want to talk ball with somebody. And, I just so happened to meet some internet buddies, Bob Trollsby, Fireball, Matt Marchesini, and we had to start a podcast together, man. Our outlet to talking ball through the Bosco's Boys, our mothership podcast kind of dissipated and went away. So we just decided, let's just keep talking ball, man. And we did that. And Bob will tell you the history of the Cocaine Willie name. I've told that story so many times, but man, I couldn't be happier talking ball with my boys. And that's just what you have to do. You got to talk ball with your boys.
You've got to talk ball with your boys. My story with K-State is I'm a sixth generation Kansan. So my entire family is rooted in the history of the state itself, and immigrants from Austria came over, in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, and settled in central Kansas. And
Is Trollsby Austrian then? Is that the origin of that?
It is super Austrian. It actually hails from the Moravia region. It's an incredibly Austrian name. But no, for those of you who are maybe K-Staters listening to this, the maiden, or my grandmother's maiden name is Omach, which is spelled OAHNMACHT. So it's a little bit of a mouthful, but there's some Schreibers in there. There's a lot of different.
What's your social security number while you're at it, brother?
I'm not doxing anybody. I'm not doxing anybody here. But
I was going to say, BYU fans are all about family history, so this is great.
There you go. Yeah. So tons of history rooted in the state. My mom went to Kansas State herself. my grandma went to high school with a guy. The reason why she became a K-State fan is she went to high school with a guy who ended up playing men's basketball at K-State on one of our Final Four teams in the late 50s. So tons of history rooted in the state. And I've been a fan since as long as I can remember. My dad played baseball and coached baseball at Creighton University, but they never had a football team. And we went to K-State football games realistically since I was probably 6, 7, 8 years old. So my entire identity is rooted in K-State sports. Went to school there and graduated from the school. And that's my history with the team and how I got into covering it. I was in some student radio, student journalism at Kansas State and wrote for the Collegian and also did some student radio. Actually had a political commentary show, which was hilarious back in the day, called Bebops and Bureaucracy. But we since moved on to just covering sports and talking ball. I met Chef through Bosco's Boys, which he's already referenced. A guy named Scott Wildcat. We won't say his real last name on the show here, but Scott Wildcat has a show called Bosco's Boys. He had a live show every Wednesday at 7:00 Central Time that Chef and I started joining at different spots in time. And after a certain period of time, he would cut that out at about an hour time limit. And Chef and I are like, we want to keep talking, right? And it was peak of conference realignment. So this was summer of 2022. And even before that, summer of 2021, when Texas and OU initially announced, we were both on those Bosco's Boys live shows talking about the situation and where we thought the conference was going to go. And then we obviously make the addition to add BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF. And then a year later, we get the additions of the Four Corner schools, or I guess 2 years later. So it's been a wild ride. We what started out as an after party to another podcast live show has now evolved into our own podcast that we're running ourselves.
Awesome. I love it. And that's so cool. I do love when hearing about people that, because I experienced that. I always wanted to go to BYU. So when you have people that end up at the dream school that they, grew up rooting for their whole lives. You guys mentioned the Cocaine Willie name. I also want to show, I think it looks like it's extended beyond just cocaine. Now it's apparently meth as well. But I think this kind of a representation of that.
Yeah, it is a non-official name, a very unofficial name for an alternate mascot from the 70s and also an alternate logo of K-State.
I think what the school's actual name for that era of K-State was Fluffy Willie or Fluffy or what is it?
Well, there's Shaggy Cat and
Shaggy Cat.
Yeah,
Shaggy Cat
now too. So who knows? Who knows what the official name for it is at this point?
Shaggy Cat, huh? That seems like a very politically correct way of saying that. So
they were shagging for sure.
Is this the
yes
Willie logo?
There it is.
Shout out to our basketball team embracing Shaggy Cat, because our new uniforms, like if you zoom in on the nape of the neck of that Willie the Wildcat right there, it's going to be on our new basketball uniforms for everybody to see. Some people think it looks like cows, but or a cow print, but I think it looks very, very good.
Well, and who did it first? Our StreamYard backdrop is a very zoomed in version of the Cocaine Willie logo, and I've had that up there for a year now. So
I mean, I think they might be
some people say that we're trendsetters. I don't know.
Yes, some people say.
Okay, I'm trying to find, because I did see a little thing on Twitter that they posted, but I didn't notice that. They were just doing some dance moves or something.
Oh yeah,
I'll look through it for it. But great. So now that we got that out of the way, the Cocaine Willie, that is, let's talk ball. So K-State, they are preseason front runner for the Big 12. In the top 25, now a top 15 team right there in the mix with right there, kind of all grouped together, Utah or Oklahoma State and K-State. And so tell us a little bit about, you had some pretty good success last year, but how K-State's looking to build on that this year and what you're kind of looking to accomplish going into this season.
Man, talk about expectations. I mean, it's really what you expect from a Chris Kleiman led program. He's raised the floor so high. And, 2022, we win the Big 12 championship. We defeated an undefeated TCU team in Arlington that year. Last year, a lot of the team returned. Some of the team that, could have made it to the NFL returned back and put off the NFL dreams for another wild ride. And to say it was a disappointment would be a little bit of a disservice to that team. We went 9-3 and make it to what bowl game did we go to last year? The Pop-Tarts Bowl.
Pop-Tarts.
Yes, Pop-Tarts Bowl. And it was a little bit of a wild time because we had Will Howard, who is the starting quarterback at the Ohio State Buckeyes, and we had Avery Johnson, who is our quarterback now. And so there was a little bit of a dynamic there that we never really got over. The team was kind of divided, but we've powered through that, got to our Pop-Tarts Bowl, and Avery Johnson takes over the team. Were the expectations a little higher last year? Yeah. Did we reach them? Not necessarily, but now we're moved on into the Avery Johnson era, and the expectations only got higher. For some reason, they only got higher. The team is ultra talented, probably the most talented team Chris Kleiman has had in his tenure. It's 5 or 6 year tenure, 5 year. And man, Avery Johnson is I don't even know what you would call him, our savior. What would you?
He's
our sunshine. And so Avery Johnson takes over, and Bob will let you know about what's going to happen this year and what we're thinking.
Yeah, I think when you look at the last 3 seasons, counting 2024, I'm counting this season. When you look at 2023 and 2022, what those 2 seasons kind of came down to is you have a lot of one-score games that you're either coming out on the winning end on in 2022, then leading to a Big 12 championship, or in the case of last year, you have a lot of one-score games that you lost, like Oklahoma State, which you could make the argument that it's not a one-score game, but
Nope.
technically 8 points
Don't do that.
Is a one-score game. You've got the Iowa State game, which was just a complete debacle. And seems like maybe we didn't even have the right cleats for that game. I don't know what the hell happened there. That was a poor showing, but you come out on the wrong side of some of those one-score games last year, especially in that overtime matchup against a very good college football playoff bound Texas team in overtime in Austin, and you lose that game because Will Howard maybe didn't have the right read on which seam he should have ran through to get to a touchdown in the final play of the game. But all of that is to say, coming into this season, you hope that the ball bounces in the right direction this year. You hope that with all the talent that you have in the arsenal and bringing in guys in the transfer portal like a Dylan Edwards, who had some major flashes last year for Colorado, specifically in that matchup against TCU, where I think he had 4 or 5 touchdowns in that matchup against TCU to start the season last year. You bring in a guy named Dante Cephas at wide receiver, who had multiple, 2 1,500-yard plus receiving seasons at Kent State prior to transferring to Penn State, where he was unheard of last year, and reunites this season with his wide receiver coach in Matthew Middleton at K-State. So the hope is, okay, can he return to the form that he was in at Kent State for those 2 seasons when he had Matthew Middleton as his wide receivers coach prior to transferring to Penn State, who, again, you can make the argument that they didn't have a great quarterback situation at Penn State. And now they've got a good offensive coordinator that they've hired, Andy Kotelnicki, after firing their offensive coordinator last year. So there's just a lot of talent on this team. DJ Giddens returns as one of the most underrated running backs, I would say, in the country. And I'm not trying to sugarcoat that. He's legitimately a top 5 running back in the Big 12. And this is a stacked Big 12 when you look at the running back arsenal in this conference. Very, very underrated, not talked about enough. And he flies under the radar as well. So, and that's not even mentioning Avery Johnson yet from what I've said yet. Chef covered everything there is to cover on Avery. And then when you look at the defensive side of the ball, you're returning a lot of guys who may have been younger contributors last year, like an Austin Romaine, who's come in and had a phenomenal start to the season this year. What was he? Big 12 player of the week last year last week on defense against Arizona, I think.
Well, I think he was Big 12 defensive player of the week for the Tulane game when he forced the fumble that led to a fumble 6. Yeah, Bob's going to run down the list of all the players that we have, and that does tell you the talent that we have, because we could go on for days, and I'm sure you're going to ask about a lot of these players. But when it comes to expectations for this season, I think we are on the cusp of a 12-team playoff berth. So where we're ranked right now, 13th in the country, we're right there. We have some stuff to prove, and a 3-0 start is where we're at right now, and the job's not done. So yeah, the expectations sky high.
Yeah, and being 3-1 is still really good. That's early enough loss. We can build back from that throughout the rest of the season. So I love that for Kansas State. So you had mentioned your head coach, Chris Kleiman. There's a lot of coaches out there that are likable, but he's one that for whatever reason, I don't know a ton about him, but from what I've seen, like, he seems really respectable. He's a kind of guy that's had success at every level, but previous to coming to the getting the Kansas State job, he was at North Dakota State. So he made a big jump. He went straight from FCS to Power 5, and where he's continued to have success. Although North Dakota State, as we saw at the beginning of the season, they're certainly a powerhouse and a mainstay at the FCS level, and certainly better than many teams in the FBS level. So can you talk a little bit about him and what he brings to Kansas State? Because like BYU, Kansas State had one head coach for a very long time, Bill Snyder, that had a huge impact and really helped kind of establish what Kansas State is, at least into the minds of many fans. So talk about Kleiman and what he brings to this team, and how kind of that transition to him, and how he does he continue that legacy? Does it still feel like he embodies what K-State is, and how does he add to it?
Without a doubt, because I feel like, and I would be remiss not to mention Ron Prince. There were 3 years in between Snyder 1.0 and Snyder 2.0, as we refer to it in the K-State vernacular. But Ron Prince never really fit with K-State. He was kind of, he liked to lean into the flashier recruiting, just the locker room culture, everything was different. And he was the kind of guy where Bill Snyder, he's an old school type of ball coach. Ron Prince was almost just too intense and too aggressive in ways that Bill Snyder wasn't. We've heard former players refer to him as a sociopath. He would do things that permeated kind of a toxic culture. So we've seen what it looks like when you go away from guys that will kind of, I don't know how to put it other than guys that will kind of lean into this K-State identity of, for better or worse, we have this identity of walk-on players that come in and exceed expectations. Guys like Jordy Nelson or Ryan Mueller. You've got this gritty attitude, this in-state recruiting mentality, and really just trying to fly under the radar and overperform to your expectations. Whereas Ron Prince wasn't necessarily like that. He just tried to make big splashes, and it never really panned out. He would always beat Texas, but he would never beat Kansas, as an example. Whereas Kleiman has embodied the Snyder mentality of, we're always going to focus on trying to build up players and develop talent in-house, try to go after guys in the transfer portal that maybe are more of those less developed guys that we see raw talent in. Guys like Felix Anudike-Uzama, not transfer portal guys, but Felix came in as a 2-star recruit who was just enrolled at Missouri as a student, and comes in. He was maybe 180 pounds soaking wet, and then becomes a first-round draft pick to the Kansas City Chiefs as a defensive end. So Kleiman has done a lot to kind of continue that legacy of going out and identifying talent that maybe isn't 4-star or 5-star type of talent. Although we've reached a point now with NIL where we're getting 4-star and 5-star talent now. So where can Kleiman take the program from here, now that we're not relying on 2-star and 3-star talent? That's where I think the question remains to be seen of We've got guys like Avery. We've got guys like Lincoln Cure who are going to be coming in as a 5-star guy in state. I really do think that Kleiman has continued to build on the legacy that Bill Snyder started, as opposed to going away from that foundation.
Yeah, for sure. And you brought it up, and I won't mention Ron Prince anymore. We've had enough Ron Prince talk, but Chris Kleiman would say football is football. And so he comes from that FCS level, but he had multiple national championships with that FCS program. And the first mention that our first introduction to Chris Kleiman as K-State fans was 2013, coming off of a Big 12 championship, and North Dakota State comes in and knocks us off in Manhattan. So he was very familiar with K-State before he even took the job. But Chris Kleiman is an excellent coach. Bob laid it out there. He's raised the floor of the program, and it's not so much necessarily that hardworking, nose to the ground kind of walk-on kind of program like Bob was mentioning, but we are bringing in that talent to raise the athleticism to reach that upper echelon, and especially with how, like we said earlier, how wide open the college football playoff is now, and everybody's getting an opportunity, not necessarily to win the national championship, but to put your hat in your name in the hat. And so Chris Kleiman is doing that. Chris Kleiman's a hell of a coach. He's our guy. Hopefully, he sticks around for a very long time until he decides to hang it up and he names a successor, and who knows who that will be. But man, Chris Kleiman has done it. And Kalani Sitake had some very high praise for him. They hung out with each other, him and Chris Kleiman's wife, at a Nike retreat, and everybody seems like they're hunky dory until BYU is 3-1 at the end of this.
Yeah, you guys talked about recruiting, and that's something that BYU can empathize with, because I'm looking at it. You guys are like consistently in the 50s, except for 23. You guys were ranked 39th in recruiting, but the mantra was always, let's do more with less. And that's starting to change. You see that with BYU basketball really changing, which that'll be another podcast. We can talk about that later.
Yeah, who's going to get AJ DeBonsa? Who's going to win that sweepstakes? Seems like K-State might be a dark horse now.
I'm hearing BYU is the front runner, although I was hearing, it was on the Locked On Cougars podcast, and he was saying that, I believe that's where it was. Anyway, I think it was somewhere else, but they were saying that they would still take the field over BYU. Like BYU might be the front runner out of like the teams that have been listed, but they would take the field just because it's, this guy is so sought after. People want him so badly. There's going to be so much money. Really, anything could happen, and I think that's fair. So, by no means are BYU fans like already counting it as a done deal. But man, for wherever he goes. I mean, this is program changing. I mean, you guys are used to having a sustained amount of success, and BYU's had its moments throughout history, but no Final Four appearances. This is just like. And, there's always that kind of stigma, I think, that goes with BYU, thinking, okay, it's a little bit different. Maybe it's harder to recruit there. And if you get a guy like that, that's just completely change any program. But we've completely digressed. We will save this for another day. I didn't mean to derail us that much. But yeah, and we see that with like Jay Hill, our previous defensive staff seemed like they kind of shied away from some of those, like getting into, going after some of these guys that were really sought after, but Jay Hill's going after everyone. And we're seeing hopefully that continue to improve for BYU. And I'm sure it will likewise with K-State, but I think, so that's just, I think between coaches and kind of that, doing more with less mentality, those are two things that these programs have in common. Also, speaking of head coaches, I'd be remiss to bring up Kansas City Chiefs head coach Andy Reid. And who's he rooting for this weekend? Do you guys know by chance?
I would imagine BYU, but I think if he knows what's good for him,
Let's just hope there's a friendly wager between Felix and Andy in the clubhouse this week.
He needs to start playing Felix. I mean, my God, he doesn't. Felix got 3 snaps.
He have a fumble recovery at some point in the last 3 weeks.
Okay.
Did you see? Last year they did a. Oh yeah, there it was with Travis Kelce
with the Iowa State bet.
Yeah, well, no, with
BYU,
with Cincy and BYU, and he came on, or he went on his podcast, his show. Wearing this because he had
yes.
Yeah. So, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know if Andy Reid gets in the mix there on those things, but I would love it if it got into some sort of bet there. I love that. So a lot of Big 12 ties on that KC team. But
yeah. Travis did a bet. There's a bunch of staffers, I guess, that went to Iowa State, so we did a kind of a friendly bet with them too. And I think the Iowa State Cyclone mascot either joined him at the press conference the following week after the game. Or he had to wear the head. I forget exactly what it was, but
I remember George Kittle doing it with Brock Purdy.
Yes, that too.
Yeah, so those NFL guys are really petty about that, and I love it.
I love it. I love that he does that. It makes me like him more and can kind of overlook the whole Taylor Swift thing. So, but all right. So let's get back to K-State football. We have really derailed here a lot. So. All right, so you've already talked a bit about the team, but let's go through offensively in terms of what is K-State's offensive identity and what do you expect to be their game plan coming into Provo?
Yeah, man, it's been a roller coaster this season, brother. Let me tell you, we didn't know necessarily what the identity of this team was going to be. We had high expectations for Avery Johnson, high expectations for probably the best, well, on paper, the best wide receiver unit that we've had under Chris Kleiman. So some people were, predicting sort of like an air it out kind of offense with this guy. We do have a new offensive coordinator in Connor Riley, who was our our O-line coach prior to becoming that offensive coordinator. So that kind of should have gave away a little bit of indication on what we wanted to do as an offense. To the fans of K-State, that O-line mentality is still coming out in this team. So after 3 games, I think we've established that we are a run-first team. And we have a 2-headed running back duo in the backfield in DJ Giddens and Dylan Edwards. And, Dylan Edwards has probably had 12 touches. Somewhere around there. Probably closer to 16 touches now in the 15 touches, as Bob tells me in the chat. 15 touches this season. That's all he's had. That's including special teams, including offense, and in the receiving game. 15 touches. He's got 4 touchdowns for Kansas State. So, man, oh man, he's explosive. DJ Giddens has been our best running back we've had since Deuce Vaughn, and he was there with him. And man, he's ultra consistent. It was prior to this game versus Arizona, he was on a 6-game streak of 100-yard rushing performances. So our running back duo is very, very strong. And then you include Avery Johnson in that, who, brought the wheels out for that Arizona game with 17 rushes, and he was well over 100 yards, especially if you take away the sack yardage. So running is our first thing. That's what we want to do. And in our podcast that we did together over on the Cocaine Willie podcast, you mentioned that you guys haven't given up a passing touchdown all season, and we haven't haven't thrown a touchdown to a receiver all season. So if maybe it's the tight ends, that's the offense that we're going to be running basically the entire game. We've had a couple 3 tight end sets this season that we've brought out. But man, oh man, we're going to have to facilitate the ball to the receivers eventually. But right now, I think our offense is just predicated on running the ball and getting that running game established.
Yeah, and Dylan Edwards, I can't say enough about that kid. He's been an incredible asset in an addition to this offense. He's a guy who has a very colorful history with K-State. His dad played at K-State back in the day in the
Shout out
early
to Leon.
90s. Shout out to Leon Edwards. Dylan commits as a 4-star commitment from Derby, Kansas, and decommits after about 2 weeks, commits to Notre Dame, then decommits from Notre Dame to Colorado once Dion gets a job at Colorado, then plays the season with them, enters the portal after spring ball, a week before their spring game, and then immediately commits almost on site to K-State. So he and Avery have been friends since middle school. They've played, or maybe even before that.
Elementary, brother.
They played like Pee-wee football together. They haven't played on the same team really since then, but they competed in some high-flying matchups in high school when Avery was at Derby, or when Avery was at Mays and Dylan was at Derby. I think they had a game that was like 65-64 or something in a high school matchup. High-flying offense, and Dylan really hasn't missed a beat, to be honest with you. He has the same amount of speed and kind of track star ability that he had in high school. He hasn't skipped a beat in that regard. And being able to have that chemistry with his quarterback has been a tremendous asset as well. So I can't say enough about what Dylan's been able to do, both in the receiving game and the rushing game. And to Chef's point, that the tight end room's kind of funny too. The guy that we all thought was going to be the number one guy going into the season was Garrett Oakley, who knew who it was going to be coming out of Ben Sinnott, and a few years of Ben Sinnott really being the number one guy, and then getting drafted by the Commanders in the second round last year, third round last year. And we all thought Garrett Oakley was going to be the guy. Garrett Oakley coming into this week has 1 catch for 10 yards right now. We meanwhile have a tight end 3, who I think he was supposed to be tight end 3, Braden Lofton, 6 receptions for 86 yards and 2 tuds so far this season. So really kind of flipped the script on us on where we thought the expectations were for the tight end room. Really have not panned out the way that everybody thought they were going to. And then wide receiver, I mentioned Dante Cephas already. That guy who coming into this season was one of the most highly touted transfers of the cycle for us going into spring ball. He's also at 1 catch for 9 yards going into this week with BYU. So it's been a really strange year, I think, offensively. We know what we have in Avery, Dylan, and DJ. It's outside of those guys. What do we have with Jace Brown, who really emerged last year as one of our best, if not our best, wide receiver coming into this season? He's at 148 yards right now, and no touchdowns because he's a wide receiver apparently. And Keegan Johnson's a guy who we've seen flashes last year. His Texas game matchup was really good. This year we've started to see him come on a little bit more game after game. Will we continue to see progression from him throughout the season is going to be the real question. So, and then Trey Spivey's a young cat. He comes in. He's the son of an MLB baseball player, a World Series champion.
Shout out to Junior.
Shout out to Junior Spivey. He listens to the show, I believe. Trey comes in as a redshirt freshman, I believe, and he's got 5 catches for 41 yards, and we'll see what he can do. But he's shown some flashes already this season too. So it's been fun. It's going to be interesting to see how those different position groups develop, but specifically wide receiver and tight end as the season goes on further.
And I would hate to mention the offense without bringing up the offensive line, who we lost, who we thought was a projected first rounder, and he's a starting center for the Dallas Cowboys and Cooper Beebe. We also had a draft pick at left tackle and KT Levinson to the Rams. We flipped this offensive line, and I think they haven't really skipped a beat once we figured out what kind of blocking scheme that we wanted to run. I think we kind of at the beginning of the season tried out a bunch of different concepts and gap schemes and pin and pulls and all that noise, but I think we're mostly a zone running scheme kind of offense. It's fit well with what Avery Johnson is probably going to be able to do a little bit in this BYU game, starting with that Arizona game where we're doing more read options and trying to get him out on the edge and making the defense, make a decision on who they want to stick with and who they want to stop. So we're gonna see a lot of running, I'm excited for it. We're going to see who's better in the trenches, and I know BYU has got some dogs up front. So let's see who's the champion here.
All right. So who would you say is going to be like the player to watch on offense? I know Avery Johnson gets a lot of commentary in the public eye. Like he's definitely the face of the program, getting compared to not one, but two characters from Remember the Titans very regularly. So, but is he really going to be like, who would you say out of anyone would you expect to be like the standout player on offense?
I'm going to go with Dylan Edwards. Bob just laid out his whole his life on for the BYU Coug fan base. But I'm going to tell you that this is elite speed. It's not a lot of people have this kind of speed. This is a 23 mile per hour kind of speed that you're going to see in Dylan Edwards in a small frame. I mean, he's probably maybe 5'9", maybe 165 pounds, maybe. But the boy can fly. So if we can find a way to get him the ball and get him out into space, I don't see, this is no insult to BYU, and this is no insult to anybody, but there's not a lot of people that can keep up with him. So you have to keep them contained. You have to keep them bottled up. But I think Dylan Edwards is going to be able to, pop off some runs and get it going and put his name out on the map.
Awesome. So let's switch to not awesome for BYU, but like deal. So let's switch to the other side of the ball and talk about the defense. So what is the defensive identity of this Kansas State team? What are they doing schematically, and what do you expect to see from them?
Well, I can't necessarily talk about the scheme other than we have kind of a 3-3-5 base, but they're mixing in some more four-man front just in general on defense. And I think a big part of that's because the Big 12 has made such a big adjustment back to, okay, every team's running 3-3-5 now, so we need to throw some different looks. And you saw it last week against Arizona. K-State threw basically any defensive scheme you could think of at Tet McMillan to try to contain him on offense. But when you look at the DBs, this is an interesting group because it's really a bunch of portal guys for the most part. You've got Jordan Riley, you've got Marquis Siegel, and you've got, who am I missing here, Chef?
Nobody else is in the portal, brother. Those are homegrown talent outside of those two.
Yeah. So those two guys, though, we got a lot of pub from Marquis Siegel coming out of last season because he had a ton of pass deflections but no interception.
Yes.
And if only he could catch the ball on those pass deflections, because there were multiple where it hit him in both hands. It was like, okay, Marquis Siegel, if his hands can catch half of those, he's going to have 6 or 7 interceptions this season. So there was a lot of publicity about Marquis Siegel coming out of last season, coming into this year. And then Jordan Riley got a ton of run in press conferences during fall camp. He comes in from Ball State or Rice?
Ball State, baby.
Who's the Rice guy?
Jordan Dunbar, but he is a reserve. And
right.
We don't talk about reserves.
Yeah, so Jordan Riley had a really rough game against Tulane, but outside of that has looked pretty salty this season. He got absolutely torched for the entirety of the Tulane game to the point where it was so bad that my dad is texting me, what's going on with number 6? Like this dude, he needs to get his head in the game. But he had a great game last week. And I really do think that those two guys are kind of the leaders of the DB room. And Chef, maybe I'll let you talk about VJ, some of the other guys in the DB.
Oh yeah, I mean the defensive backfield is, it was supposed to be the strong suit of our defense for sure. VJ Payne, a very lengthy DB, number 19. You're gonna love watching him play. Very physical. He needs to work on his ball skills a little bit more, but I think he is one of the few DBs that actually have an interception this season. So maybe I'm talking out of my butt, but 2 lockdown corners, Jacob Parrish and Keenan Garber, Kansas kids. So you love to see the local talent growing right there. And the DBs are looking very, very good. They're undersized, but that's what you're going to get sometimes. I think you want to see the scrappy, undersized DBs more than you want to see the well, that's not necessarily true either. I kind of want to see those 6'4" corners out there. But
oh yeah,
inside that, when like Bob said, that 3-3-5, one guy you're gonna you're not gonna be able to miss him. Number 32, Desmond Purnell. He plays our strong side Sam linebacker, and he can come up and he'll hit you. He's I compared him to a bowling ball with barbed wire on it. He's probably 5'11". He started out as a safety at Kansas State out of high school and moved down to linebacker out of necessity. And I don't know where all this weight came from, but he is solid 240 pounds, 5'11", and he runs like a deer, and he won't mind throwing his head on top of you. So yeah, Desmond Purnell is probably one of my favorite players. He loves throwing up the lynch mob hand signal. Love that. He's a fan favorite. Gotta love that. And then, D-line, like I said, the trenches is where this game's going to be won. I know you guys got a solid left tackle in, what's his name, ETN, famous college football last name. I don't know where all these ETNs are coming from, but my goodness, he's a pretty good left tackle for you guys. But he's going to be going up against Brendan Mott, and I think that's going to be a matchup made in heaven, man. Brendan Mott, Iowa kid, 6'5", 255 pounds. He's going to play the run. He's going to play the pass. He's going to try to get all over the quarterback. And in the nose tackles, you guys have some serious Polynesian flavor to that BYU team, and we got some Polynesian flavor. Damian Iolio, I love saying that name. He's from a Manhattan kid, so he's as local as it can get. And then Uso Seamalo, maybe I don't know. I have to look at the BYU roster. You got some Polynesians on there, so they're maybe the biggest kid in the Big 12. 6'3", probably about 360 pounds, 355 pounds. Big rock in the middle, but he has to learn on playing with his leverage and all that stuff. But he's getting there. He's a senior, but he's still learning the game of football. He was a volleyball player, for God's sakes, in high school, which is so weird. I could not imagine him jumping to hit a ball, which would be really cool to actually visualize.
He's a big Hawaiian dude, 6'3", 333, as listed on the K-State website from
I'd say he's a lot
Mauna Loa, Hawaii.
Yeah, so that's the defense. I love our defense. We're a scrappy bunch, and you're going to see some rotation too, but it's really those main staples right there that are going to try to get after it. We've got a lot of sacks on the season. I think if Bob looks that up, I think we're at 11 sacks on the season, 5 in the first game, 5 in the second game, but a lot of those came with blitzes. And that was the real pet peeve of some of the fan bases that, we weren't getting there with, 3 or 4 guys. We were having to send 6, 7 guys at a time to try to get to the quarterback to create some pressure because we're getting torched on the back end. But, I think we figured some things out in terms of communication and some effort, and the DNs looked a lot better in this last game. It was only 1 sack, but, Noah Fafita, who you guys will probably get to know from Arizona, he's hard to tackle. He drops back about 20 yards, and you really can't sack the kid. So, yeah, it was a good effort from the D-line in this last game versus a ranked Arizona team.
That's what I was going to ask you is what did Kansas State do to slow Arizona down, which is supposed to be kind of a high octane offense when you got a cute quarterback like that likes to air it out.
Bend but don't break, because Tet McMillan still had 138 yards, I think,
on 11 catches. The boy was cooking.
I mean, they still you allow a touchdown on the first drive, and then you shut them out the rest of the game.
14 play drive.
That's something we saw this defense do a lot last year. I mean, we shut out TCU. We nearly shut out. Wait, no, we shut out Houston. We nearly shut out TCU.
No, we shut out both, didn't we?
I could have sworn we gave up a field goal to TCU maybe last year.
No, you're right. You're absolutely correct. You're right.
Yeah, but either way, both games are like 40 plus points for K-State and 0 or 3 points in both of those matchups. But Houston wasn't bend but don't break. But the story with both those games is, even if you did see a weakness or you get the other team gets across the other side of the field, the defense made adjustments and didn't allow for that to happen the rest of the game. I mentioned it already, but our defense threw basically every scheme in the book at T-Mac to try to limit his ability to make catches. And it worked. I mean, he still had 138 yards, but like, that's probably the maximum allowable yards for a guy like that, where you can still win the game and limit them to 7 points. We totally took their rushing game completely out of the game.
Yep, that's absolutely the key.
That's one of the biggest things for K-State's defense this year is our rushing defense has been amazing. The Tulane game had some blips on the radar, but you look at both the UT Martin game, the Arizona game, you're limiting those rushing attacks to virtually nothing. So I think those are some of the big things. But Chef, give your take.
Yeah, I mean, Tetero and McMillan, you're never going to really stop him. I don't know what the deal was with Northern Arizona. He had 2 catches for 11 yards, but I think he was kind of checked out of that game because they had
covered him all game.
Yeah, and they literally didn't have anybody to throw to him because Noah Fafita was getting sacked every play. But yeah, the defense has been really all about stopping the run first. You stop the run, you get them one-dimensional, and say, hey, if you're going to beat us, you're going to have to throw into man coverage with a high safety over the top, and we know you're passing. So good luck. That's basically what the defense is trying to do. After that first drive for Arizona, they went 14 plays, marched down the field, inched their way down the field and got in the end zone. We made the adjustment. We put the pressure on them, had a punt return for a touchdown. Now they're down. They're having to chase points. We get an interception, come out of halftime, score again. Now they're down 14, and we know they're going to pass. So, yeah, it's really about getting the team one-dimensional. And once you do that, we can try to only rush 3, and now you're passing into 8 guys. And if there's not a lot of quarterbacks on the planet that can throw into man coverage plus zone coverage with different schemes with only rushing 3 and still trying to get some pressure on you. It's hard to do that when you're down points and we know you're going to pass. So that's going to be the game plan for most games is, stop the run, score, try to make them one-dimensional.
Well, that bodes well for K-State against BYU because we're already one-dimensional. So shoot, that doesn't make me feel all warm and cuddly. So who do you think out of all the players, you mentioned some solid guys you have, who do you think will be the one real kind of defensive standout?
My matchup, I think it's a matchup because I think your guys' offense is, there's some elements to this offense that is scary. That's what Tulane did. They beat us through the air, and I think that's what BYU is going to end up having to do. And if they can do it early, that's really the game plan for BYU is score first. And I don't know if necessarily our offense is built to, come back. And we were down 10 to Tulane, but we inched our way back and we kept going back and forth. But I don't know if we want to do that week in and week out to try to do that. I think we want to be the boa constrictor and, get on you early and squeeze the life out of you. So my matchup for this is Jacob Parrish versus Chase Roberts. I say that right? I keep thinking I'm messing that up. But Chase Roberts is probably one of the top 5 receivers in the Big 12. If we're being honest, I mean, he's got production. He swags on him. He looks good out there playing in those all white uniforms, I think is what we're going to be able to see. But Jacob Parrish is our number 1 lockdown corner. So I don't know if we're going to be following him or anything like that, but I'm looking for Jacob Parrish in that one-on-one matchup to see who's giving, who's taking, and how that works out. So I'm looking for Jacob Parrish, number 10. Look for him on the field.
All right.
For me, it's going to be a guy that we haven't necessarily talked about yet, but it's Toby Osinsami. I want to see a lot of pressures on the quarterback, and he's a defensive end that was a little bit quiet the last couple of games, had a massive game against UT Martin, obviously against an FCS opponent. But this is a guy similar to Dylan Edwards on the other side of the ball has that track ability to get
Yes.
off the blocks. And this dude, as a defensive end, is one of the top 5 fastest players on the team. And he can clock close to 21, 22, 23 miles an hour himself in his own right. So I want to see some QB pressures from Toby O and hopefully get a sack or two as well.
And the thing about Toby Osunsami is he's trying to round into that complete defensive end. He's arguably, I mean, not arguably, look up at the depth chart. He is our smallest defensive end. He's probably 6'2", 230, but he's trying to be an every down defensive end coming from that linebacker position. If he can, complete his defensive end transformation and be a run stopper first, then you get that's the dessert at the end of the meal is you finally get to rush the quarterback. So hopefully he can play the run well. Like I said, that's the scheme. We want to stop the run. So if he can play the run and be a good solid defensive end first, now you can put that track speed and get off the blocks and try to beat that tackle around the corner.
All right. So just to kind of summarize, because we're looking at this, you guys mentioned that your run first team, because I'm just trying to think now, big picture, how this game goes before we do our score predictions. You said you're not sure you're built to come back. And I was looking at the stats from the Tulane game, and it looked more even, like you run more, but it really wasn't that. But I guess that would make sense. If you're coming back, you kind of have to pass a little bit more. And then Arizona, when you're out by that much, obviously you're going to just run more to run out the clock. And so that's a little bit skewed. So it's a small sample size, but I think you guys made a good point that both teams are going to want to get up early because BYU is going to get who's already relying on passing. But if K-State gets up and is able to just keep running the ball, hold on to the ball and run out that clock, then even though BYU can get those big chunk plays, it's going to make them even more one-dimensional trying to catch up. So should be a really fun matchup. It's amazing that the line has gotten as close as it has. So
I think there's a lot of money out in Utah, man. They're putting
BYU vampires too.
Yeah, that's an element we haven't talked about, and I think that's exactly why K-State wants to play the game plan that we want to play. We want to limit these possessions for BYU so they can't, jump out and hit us with big explosive chunk plays. If we're holding on to that ball and we're putting 5-6 minute drives together, that's half of a quarter basically every time we touch the ball. That's a recipe to win. So, man, that's my worst nightmare. That is literally my worst nightmare. It's 10:30 for me watching that game. That's going to literally be a nightmare. I'll probably have nightmares about it at 1:30 in the morning when that game's finished. If BYU is able to jump on us early and freaking that crowd is barking and getting crazy, I'm not looking forward to that. So we have to, as K-State fans, look for us to get it done early and try to put the boa constrictor on them.
All right. So with that said, what are you guys' predictions, final score predictions for the game?
I'll go first. I don't think it's as close. I mean, it is going to be a close game. I think it's going to be a 2-possession game, 10 points. I've got it 31 to, well, that's 11 points, math pod. 31 to 20. The good guys, K-State. I think it's going to be close, though. I think we might be able to pull out towards the end and, get a late touchdown, extend it. I think it might be a 3-point game back and forth throughout the game. So I think they're going to be able to score. I think you guys can throw the ball. You guys got a lot of receivers. That really spooks me. If you guys come out in 5 wide, I don't know what we're going to do. I'm going to freak out.
Yeah, I'm going 27-21 in this one, keeping it pretty close to where Vegas thinks this game is probably going to go. I think the over-under is 47.5, 48.5, something like that. And the spread now, as we're recording this, is 6.5. So I think it's going to be close. It's going to be a bit of a, as my dad would say, a nut cutter. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. Go Cats.
Shout out to Mr. Trollsby.
So on this one, I will say, and I said this on your guys' show, but I've had a mixed track record so far this season. I've the it's the first game, and then last game against Wyoming, I was almost spot on with the final score, and then I was really off on the SMU game. So I don't have as good a sense for this one, so I'm not feeling great about it. But I do think it'll be close. I have to go with BYU in this one. K-State's definitely a really good team. BYU is the underdog, but with the way BYU's been playing and with the way the defense has been playing, I do think BYU can be in this, especially as you guys mentioned, at night with the crowd going wild. Do a little bit of homework. Go back and watch some of the highlights from that 22 Baylor game. We also played the last time we played ASU. They were backed up the student section, and they had something like 4 or 5 false starts in a row, because it was they just kept backing up further and further and further, and it was glorious. I think they did run a play or two in between it, but it was almost consecutively, and it was just nuts. And so really good. So I'm hoping BYU fans, I won't be there, unfortunately. Should be wild. I hope they bring that kind of energy. Having said that, I do think BYU's best bet in winning this game is to limiting Kansas State from scoring. And so I do think it's going to be a little bit on the lower end. And so I think that BYU holds, but at what did I say before? I want to be consistent. I think I said 24-21 would be the final score.
Yep,
so I think it's going to be a really fun one. And I'm excited to see all that play out. So and you guys are going to get to experience staying up until 1:32 in the morning to finish a football game. I'm used to it. So
it depends on what that score is, brother. I promise you, I will not stay up if it's looking ugly.
I never can see. I always say I will, and then I never can seem to do that. I want to go back and touch on a couple things real quick. Well, first of all, we were talking about big Polynesians. We were also talking about Kansas State players and bets. I didn't even mention Kingsley Suamataia for the Kansas City Chiefs. I hope he's making a bet with somebody there. I don't know who.
I said some bad things about him, so I'm gonna.
Did
he's our left tackle for the Chiefs, ain't he?
Yeah.
That boy can't block to save his life. I'm sick of him.
He's a rookie.
Hey, that's not my problem. He needs to figure it out. I'm so mad at him right now.
Well, don't say it to his face.
I know I wouldn't. He would crush me.
But the other thing, I said I'd look it up. I finally found it. So this is
there it is.
The Cocaine Willie, the nod to him. So is this on their normal, or is this an alternate uniform?
I think it's going to be an alternate.
No, this is going to be the base uniform because, Chef, if you remember, we had the white and the purple that were our main uniforms that we wore all of conference. They were bad. The numbers didn't look right. This looks like a K-State basketball uniform. And then the other ones that were intended to be alternates became kind of our main uniforms with the script Wildcats across the front. But I would be fine with the script Wildcats being the main, the lavenders being the main, the black alternate with the script cats on that, or the anthracite, I guess, is the technical.
Hot take. I'm not a fan of those black uniforms, but whatever.
They're a little 90s for my flavor, but I still like them in general.
They're a little get them down at your local rec shop jersey for me.
Temu version of a jersey.
Yeah, that's a Temu freaking K-State jersey. I'm mad at it.
I like these though. I think these are nice and they're clean. I know everybody complains about Nike going to this kind of templatized version of uniforms, but this to me doesn't look as much like a templatized version of a uniform so much as it looks like the K-State uniforms that I associate with my time at K-State, which were the Rodney Magruder years. It was Wesley Iwundu, Shane Southwell, some of those guys. The serpentine font K-State wordmark on the front with the nice block numbers on there instead of some random font for a number is what I like for my K-State uniform. So I like these a lot personally.
Yeah, they're unique. Like you said, they're not the Nike template. They just roll them out of a Amazon box and telling you to put them on for a Wednesday matchup versus San Antonio, Florida University or whatever.
I just got to say, Doug McDaniel looks a lot better in purple than he did in maize and blue.
Let's see if he goes to class.
So I got to say, in terms of uniforms, I am I am like the equivalent of like the old man get off of my lawn kind of guy. Like I love like the old school traditional looks and really clean. And so this is fine for me for like an alternate. I love the homage that it pays to that other logo, but it's a little too cutesy for me for like a base uniform. But I do have to say though, K-State, especially football, I mean, those are top-notch football uniforms, and I love the color scheme. I really am kind of a sucker for purple on sports teams, and I'm really excited for this uniform matchup. BYU doing the 90s throwbacks, which is almost inviting bad karma. But kind of wearing the uniform that we wore in that Cotton Bowl win over K-State, but or it could be really good mojo. So we'll see how it goes. But no, I really do, and I gotta say for K-State, like in terms of other teams I root for, they've always been one that I shouldn't say always, but I liked them. You just looked at Bill Snyder and he was just like this dweeby old guy on the sideline. You couldn't believe he was a football coach. And just like I said, there's already a lot of similarities with BYU in terms of kind of doing more with less. And so I've always liked them, liked their look. And so I'm excited to play K-State. It's a team I root for when we're not playing them. But again, I'm really excited for you guys to, have this loss early in the season. So you have plenty of time to build, work your way back up in the rankings.
Stop the count.
So no, anyway, well, thanks guys for coming on, and seriously, do go check out Cocaine Willie, great show, and go check out our live show if you want to see the BYU side of things of this conversation. We go through, and it was a fun one. And again, all of their links and everything will be, they're here on the screen, but also they'll be in the comments below. So go check those out. Check out the College Huddle. We got a link to that as well. Go check out the website, all the content on there. And we're covering, FBS schools from across every conference across the country. And it's only getting bigger and bigger. So make sure you check out the College Huddle, and you can continue to see more collaborations like this. And guys, thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun. I look forward to continuing the conversation once we get to basketball season and AJ Debonsa announces that he's going to BYU. So, all right. Well,
yes, I appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
this has been a ton of fun. Shout out to the College Huddle for getting us connected.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to The Field, as noted by another BYU podcast, The Field.
I think it was on Give Them Hell, Brigham. I want to give them their dues. Yeah. So, which scares me a little bit, but I think it's also, we just don't want to get ahead of ourselves,
Oh, for sure.
Not get our hopes up too high. Because anyway, but yeah, awesome. Well, please, and I can't believe I'm terrible at plugging myself. Please be sure to like and subscribe, hit the bell, do all of those things. We appreciate it. It's free for you, and it really helps us a lot. And go check out these guys' show, and like and subscribe there as well. And as always, go Cougs.